There we go.
Thanks, Bill. Let's see. All right, I will open up this meeting of the Planning Board for the Town of Maynard. This is a special meeting for a home occupation community forum. And today is Wednesday, February 9th, 2022, and the time is 6:05 p.m. Since it's a virtual meeting, I'm going to do roll call for the Planning Board members. If you could just say yes or that you can hear me, and that you're present for all members. So Bob Brown, Jim Coleman. Jim, you're on mute. Jim, you're still on mute. Bill, if you have control, maybe. There you go, Jim.
Okay.
Thanks, Bill. Sorry, thanks, Jim. Let's see, Natalie.
Hello.
Bill Crenshaw.
Yes.
Annette.
Here.
I am also present, of course. Paul, if you would like to open up the meeting for the zoning board, please go ahead.
Sure, this is Paul Scheiner, Chairman of the Zoning Board, and we're in this meeting as well. Let's see, people of the Zoning Board, who do we have? We have Paige. We have Leslie.
Yep. Hi.
We have John.
Yep, here.
And we have Brad Schultz. Anybody else?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So this forum is designed to receive feedback from members of our community of a concept of changing the zoning bylaws regarding home-based occupations. And I have a presentation that I'm going to give that will outline what this is and what the intent is and what the sort of status of the proposal is at this moment. And then I'll open it up to public comments, questions. I'm happy to take this in any direction that feels right for this group. We can do Q&A. We can try to have a discussion based as well. If that tends to work, I'm fine with that. My goal is to focus on the zoning regs itself and to try to do our best to stay constructive and to try to find consensus where we can. So I will first give a presentation, as I said, and then we'll get into our discussion part of this meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I ask real quick, could everybody please mute if you're not muted? I can mute everybody, but I think it's easier if you do it yourself, but that would be good. And then we don't accidentally mute Chris during this. Thank you.
All right, can everyone see that? Bill, can you just give me a, yeah, okay. Okay, so this is tonight. So first, I wanted to give a sense of what a timeline looks like for this type of zoning bylaw change. I'm going to give this, so this particular change that's being proposed, or this concept that's being proposed, I'm going to use this as an example of how the process works out. So, and it helps me cover some of the backstory and why we're going about proposing this change. So back in the summer, and this is the zone. This is me speaking from what I heard from the zoning board. I'm not going to speak for the zoning board, but the zoning board conveyed to Bill and I that they were experiencing some challenges when it came to the current zoning regs and their ability to make good quality decisions, good quality informed decisions for this community and for applicants themselves. And so in September of 2021, this past September, the ZBA and the planning board had a joint meeting, and we discussed what those challenges were. And I agreed, and the planning board agreed, that this is something that we could take a look at to see if we could make improvements to improve the zoning regs themselves. In October, we formed a subcommittee to take a harder look at it. Over the winter, the subcommittee did background research and collected ideas from other communities that have implemented recent changes as well. And that's what I'm going to be presenting on now, is the concept of what the zoning board and the planning board has come up with. So that's what we're here in 2022 in February. We're here holding the public forum. From here, the idea would be that we would go back to subcommittee with the feedback we received tonight and with feedback that we received recently from a survey that was distributed over the last few weeks, a public survey regarding the same issue. We would take that information and draft a proposed change. We do not have a draft of the proposed language at this moment. We have a draft concept. So in March, we would prepare a draft of the zoning bylaw changes. In April, the planning board would issue that draft. We would review it as a planning board and issue that draft. For review, it would have to go to the select board, but also we'd like review from the public again and review from other committees in town. We would, in May, over the summer, we would hold public hearings to discuss it in detail further. And then sometime in the summer, hopefully we'd be able to issue a final version of that in preparation for town meeting. Pardon me, if you could mute yourself, please. I think it's Lincoln Durham, if you could mute yourself. Thank you. And then the goal here would be for town meeting to vote on this in the fall. So that's the general concept here. That's the timeline. So what is the challenge that we're looking at? Well, in the most broadest sense, we need better guidance so that we can make better informed decisions. Then the zoning regs, the current zoning regs, they're simply outdated. They're antiquated bylaws. And I'm going to show what those look like on the next slide. But they're outdated and they're just not useful for the modern times. They're restricted only to certain trades. They list certain trades that are allowed. Those trades would need to go for a special permit, but even if you're not part of one of those trades, you'd still have to go get a special permit through the ZBA. Permitting is just misaligned. We believe it's misaligned with needs. Permitting is based on whether, you'll see the language in the next slide, but it doesn't really meet the needs of the community from our point of view. So right there in the center of these three challenges is what I would call the location of decision-making. And so I consider this to be ineffective guidance, right? And the hope here is to get better guidance that would help us make effective decisions. So what would new zoning look like? A vision for new zoning? Well, it would be modernized for the current work environment and with current definitions. The guidance would be based on community impact instead of looking at certain trades, and that we would want permitting to be aligned with the needs of the community. So that we would call that effective guidance. So what is home occupation? Well, here's an example of the current zoning bylaws. 3.2.4 is home occupation. And under here, it says that any of the customary home occupations shall be allowed as by right and subject to the following. Hairdressers and certain sales would have to have special permits. Real estate offices would have special permits. 3.2.5 is trade shops. It lists a couple of different craftsmen, different trades here, and that it refers to them needing an annual special permit from the ZBA. So one thing to consider is that all home occupations are considered an accessory use. They are not the primary use, because the primary use of the property and the primary use of the building structure is as a residence. So the only thing we're looking at changing here, we're not looking at changing commercial laws, we're not commercial regs, we're not looking to change zoning regs around commercial industrial properties. We're here looking at home occupations as it relates to a residence as a primary use, and then a home occupation as an accessory use. So what are the changes we want to make? First is we would like to update the terminology. It's kind of confusing. There's language here about customary home occupation, and trade shop, and it's just not useful for us in this modern working environment. Change 2, we'd like to change the focus and intent of the zoning bylaws. The current zoning bylaws are based on by right trades or by right occupations, and then special permits for different trades. And we would, instead of looking at it from a, what is the business, what is the trade, what is the occupation, our vision would be to look at it, say, what is the community impact? And community impacts could be things like noise, traffic, odors, utilities. These are things that other communities have come up with. These are things that we thought of, and this is some of the feedback we've already received from the survey that was recently sent out. Change 3 would be to update and modernize permitting to match the community needs. The current zoning, again, approves listed professions with special permits that are required. We would like permits to be directed and based on impacts, not on different types of trades. So what's the scope of the change that we're considering? The scope is zoning bylaws for home occupations in residential zoned areas on a residence as the primary use, and as the home occupation as a accessory use. We are not proposing any changes, or we're not looking to have any impact on the zoning regs when it comes to commercial vehicles. We're not impacting real estate taxes. This effort is not about mixed use properties in commercial or mixed use zoning districts. This will not have any impact on business registration or code enforcement. It won't have any impact on businesses in commercial or residential districts. We're not looking at Airbnbs. We're simply looking at zoning bylaws regarding accessory use home occupations where a primary use is a resident. So that's what I have for today for an initial presentation on this. I posted here a few questions that I'll leave up for a minute just to, as a starting point. At this point, I'm happy to take public comment, public input. But first, I'm going to let Bill Nemser give us a frame if there's anything that he felt that I missed on this first. So I'm going to stop sharing. Bill Nemser, is there anything you would like to add to this, what I've presented thus far?
Thanks, Chris. No, I think you were very thorough, and you covered all the bases pretty much. The essence of it is that we have bylaws in place that govern these sort of uses, and this is an attempt just to make it better. So I really think you did a terrific job summing it up, Chris. And I would just ask if anybody, when you do open for public comment, we do have quite a few people on here, so please identify yourself and provide your address for the record.
Okay, so this is what we'll do. There are many options on how to contribute to the discussion. There is a raised hand feature. If you go down to the bottom of the Zoom page, if you're on a computer or a laptop, there is a button on the bottom called Reactions. You click on Reactions, you can use the raise hand feature. That would be I'm going to look first for the raise hand features for people that would like to speak, since we have 30 participants at this moment. After that, I'll be looking for others to chime in. I'll open it up to people speaking up if they don't know how to use the raise hand feature. Bill, is there anyone on a phone tonight, or is everyone on a computer?
It looks like everybody's on a computer, I believe. If I missed somebody on a phone, I have some people who just said like iPad and an address or a. It looks like it's all Zoom.
Okay. So,
Oh,
Sorry.
Brad, you're on a phone.
Yeah, I'm on a phone for the next half hour, 45 minutes.
All right, I thought we were perfect. Thanks, Brad. Okay.
All right. So my first question is, what do we think about the concept of changing the zoning bylaws to focus on community impacts instead of focusing on different types of trades or occupations? How does that sound to folks?
I'm trying to keep an eye out for any hands here.
Tom Whiting, I see your hand is
Yep,
raised.
Tom is, okay.
Tom, please go ahead if you will. Tom, I think you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
So I think it's a great idea to figure out community impact versus old, zoning laws that may not fit in a particular neighborhood. or an area that, warrants, having, businesses that can run out of a home. I think I think it's better for the community if they can live and work in their house. That's my opinion.
Thanks, Tom. John Corville, I saw your hand was raised. You're welcome to join us.
Yeah, my only question is, how would I know I would have to apply for a special permit? Because I don't know if I'm going to have a lot of noise or traffic coming based on an initial thought of what I'm doing for a business. Like there could be an impact once a month. There could be an impact every 3 months, or I don't know.
Understood. So I guess I hear two questions. One is how do I know if I should apply for a special permit? Well, that's a great question, and that's something that the subcommittee between the zoning board and the planning board is going to continue to consider. In the past, it's been, I believe, and maybe Bill or Brad can correct me on this, but I believe it's been annual. There's been annual permit renewals. Is that correct, zoning board or Bill Nemser?
It depends on the permit. It also depends on the type of use. That's another thing that we so for example, trade uses are required currently to renew every year. On the other hand, some of the home occupations, often the boards tend to require a renewal on the first year, and then they may extend it for a longer period. And if I, do you want me to answer the question about how would we find out, or how does it?
We'll get to that, Bill.
Right. Okay.
John, what would you consider a reasonable cadence for renewal? Every year, every 3 years? What would be your thought on renewal?
I would think every year, just so we could find out if the neighbors have any problems or what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's been the general consensus for most of the time with the ZBA.
And John, there's another question you hinted at. I actually kind of forgot what it was.
Yeah. So basically, if I say I have deliveries coming every other week, or what would the cadence be that would make that requirement hit that I have that neighborhood impact? That's what
so we don't have an answer to that, because we're still in the concept phase.
Right.
And actually I want to hear from others about, we're having this discussion so that we can have informed decisions on this. I'm curious from you, John, and others, what we would consider to be impactful. Would as you said, John, a delivery once every 3 weeks, is that impactful? Should we require a special permit for that? That's what I'm hoping to get out of today's session, if that helps, John. So you're welcome to give me your opinion on that now or later.
Well, personally, I think every 3 weeks, every 2 weeks is fine. I mean, if it's something that happens every day, then that could get annoying, but that's open for debate.
Thanks, John. I saw Michael Hart, your hand was up.
Hey, Mr. Arsenal. I had a couple of concerns, and I think that criteria need to be definitely set very stringently for this. I've been working with the town for the past 6 years with some neighbors of mine. I'm at 119 Summer Street, and they run an art manufacturing facility right next door to my house, about 12 feet away from my bedroom window. And, as to your point about deliveries, like, every 2 to 3 weeks sounds reasonable for deliveries, but when a 7 a.m. delivery with a swing dump truck full of stumps shows up and bangs out a bunch of stumps, even if it's every 3 weeks, that's still very disruptive to the community. I hope that this is being well considered about how this will transform a neighborhood's characteristic, because I haven't been able to have any enforcement actions brought so far, with plenty of evidence that zoning laws and rules are being broken. I think that maybe right now something might be happening, maybe, I don't know, but it's been a 6-year process, and I've been completely disturbed. My neighbors have been completely disturbed, and I'm hoping that whatever you guys are trying to do you know, if you're trying to make it so that people can do office type of jobs, phone calls, you know, painting, like somebody that's a painter, but you know, chainsaw sculpting and rip saws running all day every day is really not something that we should be considering at all in a residential neighborhood. I mean, I don't know if you've ever like driven between Ashland and Framingham. You can see where they've opened up regulations to have trade shops in their residential areas, and it's just kind of like a place that's fallen away to sprawly, weird, slummy landlord situations, and I would hope that Maynard isn't trying to propagate that. I obviously have strong opinions on this matter from personal experience with what I'm dealing with right now, but I'm hoping that this isn't trying to open the doors to anybody to have any kind of, you know, trade shop that they want to in the name of progress for business development in Maynard. I feel like there are already well-defined commercial districts in town. You know, the rents aren't all that expensive for things. That I know that there's a lady downtown that's got a pottery shop that's been, you know, just doing pottery and doing her thing downtown in the residential zone, or the commercial zone. I'm really hoping that we keep a very stringent set of standards as to what is acceptable in a neighborhood, so that it does not change the character of the neighborhood. Because even with the stringent standards that we have now, our neighborhood has been changed for the last 6 years, and you can ask any one of my neighbors exactly how happy they are with the people that are performing those tasks inside of our residential district. And I'll stop rambling now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mike. May I call you Mike? Is that okay?
For sure, of course.
Thanks, Mike, for your feedback. May I assume that if you were to transport yourself to a different neighborhood in Maynard, let's say on the other side, maybe near Waltham Street, for example, what would your thoughts be on an appropriate sort of home occupation that would be allowed?
You know, I would really hope that we wouldn't increase foot or vehicle traffic into an area for a commercial purpose. I would really hope that there wouldn't be noise or odor or manufacturing, any of the byproducts of manufacturing in an area. I mean, listen, if there's a lawyer that's got an office and people come in to see them, that's fine. You know, like if there's a somebody can have a barber shop in their house, fine. But if you've got a commercial manufacturing facility inside of a residential area, that's not a good look for anybody here. It's not a good look for property values. It's not a good look for, it doesn't increase the tax revenue base. It doesn't do anything but, you know, just create a non-residential characteristic to the neighborhood.
Thanks, Mike, for your feedback. I appreciate that. Kathy, I saw your hand next. Kathy Larson.
Hi. Yeah, I actually agree with a lot of the things the last gentleman said. And my other thing is, I think you've done a fabulous job. I really like the concept of doing it by impact on the neighborhood. So kudos to you for doing such a great job with that. But my one concern is, we can do all of the zoning laws in the world that are fabulous, but if they're not enforced, they don't do us any good. And to that last gentleman's comment, that we do have a difficult time enforcing some of these kind of things. So I hope that that end of the equation is being considered as well.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, and duly noted on enforcement. As planning board chair, the planning board in this capacity is not tied to obviously enforcement of any current challenges at the moment. We will interface with enforcement when it comes to a special permit of a project in town that's under the planning board that's been approved, but that's about it. I will pass along concerns about enforcement to others. I'm going to continue to focus on what we can do to improve zoning bylaws for the future. Does that make sense,
Yeah.
Kathy?
Yeah, it does. And I know you aren't
Mhm.
responsible for it, so it wasn't
Yeah.
really.
No, I got it. Yeah.
But my one other comment is I actually work from home now since the pandemic. I'm a management consultant, and I probably will continue to work from home. And so there's no impact on the neighborhood. So for those kind of jobs, you're not expecting a licensing every year or anything, because that would, I mean, you're just doing it for the ones that you decide have an impact on the neighborhood. Is that how it would work?
Under the current concept,
Yeah.
very generally, and I'll just come up with an example. Let's say there is an engineer who reviews plans at a desk inside his home and emails those plans and the stamps and the approvals of certain designs to others and has meetings on the phone and on Zoom. That's not the intent here at all, is to impact individual like that.
Okay.
Under the current concept, it's strictly about looking at what are the impacts to the community.
Okay.
And that's the concept as of now. So I'm hesitant to say exactly where this will all play out over time, but I think in this case, at least my personal opinion as one member of the planning board, I don't know if I would support any type of change. I will not support any type of change that that makes everyone that has a home occupation that's working from home because of a pandemic to have to apply for a permit. That's not the intent here at all. Does that make sense, Kathy?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Marie Gunnarsson, if you may.
Hello. Yes, Marie Gunnarsson, 119 Parker Street. And my concern, I'm going to echo some of the things. I have a couple of specifics. To pick up where Kathy left off, I think that it's important to differentiate the person who works for XYZ company working at home, either for a day or an extended time sitting there on their computer, versus someone running a separate business that's located in their home. I understand the concept. The concept certainly would broaden the possibilities. So right now, what you can do from home in this kind of a business is limited by, as you outlined in the beginning, the type of things that are allowed. So that by itself limits the number of, I guess, home opportunities, work. But to, I think it was Mark's concern, I do worry. I mean, Maynard doesn't have a lot of space. I mean, we are, cut from the corners of other towns, and we have this little postage stamp, and we have small residential areas. There's a couple of larger ones, but most of them are squeezed between existing commercial uses, and it just seems so easy in a town our size for the commercialization of the space, so that there's less or no differentiation between our commercial area and our residential area, depending on the types of businesses. And and as I drive around, I have to admit that I see some other towns. I go, this is what Maynard could be. These weren't large, fancy towns. This is what Maynard could be. So I do worry a bit, and think that it's important that the guidelines, regulations, the bylaws are strict enough to make sure we maintain the character of our residential areas. Because again, I will mention, one of the things, the reason that I think it's reasonable to address the enforcement at the planning board meeting is that oftentimes we are, as the residents, assured that that there's going to be bylaws or in place to prevent something from happening. Like, don't worry, we're going to have a code here. But if there's no enforcement capability, then those reassurances that are provided by applicants at planning board meetings become meaningless. So, enforcement is, I think, important. I do have a couple of specific areas of concern, and primarily around potential for fire. I have seen a number of news reports, and I work in an engineering firm, and we get safety things, and there have been accidents in other places started by welding, fuel stored on site. So, a business that uses any sort of welding equipment, fuels, maintains flammable materials in a residential neighborhood, especially where a lot of our houses can be very close together. And even if maybe the houses aren't close together, there may be a house, a tree, and a house. So, a fire could potentially spread easily. And certainly to what I was thinking of, somebody hammering a car repair or something like that, but certainly sculpting with chainsaws. So banging and loud noise impacts from whatever that is. I am living next door to the new development, which has its benefits, but when the dumpster call comes for 110 Grill, my house shakes because they wang that dumpster. So, and that's weekly, and it actually literally shakes the house, and I'm quite a ways away. Anything to do with traffic, parking, pickups and deliveries. A lot of these residential places, they don't have a large driveway, difficult to park off the street. Where are people going to park? Already, around my house, people park to go to the tennis courts, and they'll just park wherever they feel like it, blocking driveways, past the sign that says "Don't park beyond the corner." I do have concern about traffic, parking, pickup, delivery. And then the final thing is, and I'm not sure how to categorize this, but I'll call it lawn yard clutter, where you have lawnmowers and snow blowers and other things parked all over the yard, and have them up next to the street, where you're storing construction equipment all over your yard, and that type of thing. So those were the things that I thought of off the top of my head. So those are my concerns at the moment.
Thank you, Marie. I think that was very, very thoughtful considerations. So I really appreciate all that feedback.
Thank you.
Bill Shu.
Greetings, Bill Shu from 115 Summer Street in Maynard. I've been fortunate enough to live in Maynard with my wife for over 14 years. We're now raising 2 small children and enjoying many of the unique offerings that a small town like Maynard has to offer. I'm here in support of preserving residential districts and support those who enforce the current bylaws. That said, I've seen some of the language in the paperwork that you've had, and it seems to point as this is only a commercial and business interest. I have not yet been able to see how it benefits any of the residents in Maynard that are not commercially invested or have a business interest out of their home. Also, I am not sure who is going to determine the impact on a neighborhood and who will determine whether it's demonstrable or not. Those are very ambiguous terms and very hard to enforce based on opinion. It is under my belief that the current process for opening a business would require all neighbors to be notified, and a hearing for a permit would be done. That would allow all neighbors in the abutting areas to know that, number one, there is a business being moved in near them in a residential district, and two, they would have a chance to understand it and speak either for or against it. I am wondering what kind of process may be put in place to, and I use this language specifically because it was used in paperwork that you put on for the meeting tonight, where you said that you would like to maximize flexibility for home businesses while protecting neighbors. And I would like that language reversed, rather, where it says maximizing protections for neighbors while allowing home businesses. It does not feel that there is any interest or consideration put into the family who is simply living in Maynard and enjoying a residential community. Thank you very much for your time this evening. I'll be very interested in what occurs moving forward, and I may have some follow-up questions for you.
Thanks, Bill. I'm regarding the last sort of concept that you were saying. I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm trying to understand. You said that in this presentation tonight, we said that we're looking to maximize flexibility for a home-based business without considerations for the residents. And I'm not really sure.
It was not in the presentation. It was in the packet on board docs for tonight's meeting, along with the letters from concerned residents and the agenda. Having had sort of experience in a lack of zoning enforcement, and having been on the other end where you have to actually chase the town down and provide all the evidence as to what's occurring, I'm really discouraged to hear that you are looking at rewriting the zoning table so that most of the by rights would be increased, thus expanding and normalizing commercial interest in residential districts in Maynard. In a town of the size, that is concerning.
I'm having a hard time following you, Bill, because at no point tonight are we looking to address any of the zoning bylaw tables.
If you expand the zoning bylaws, you would need to rewrite the table to allow things without permit in the districts that we're talking about.
So we're looking at sections 3.2.4 and 3.2.5. And I'm still having a hard time following that any of the information that was presented is suggesting that we are looking to maximize it all or open it up to any type of business allowed. We're saying what I've said tonight, and I think what the material says very clearly is that home-based occupations are a accessory use in a residential zoned property. And we would be looking to update those zoning bylaws so that we can ensure that we're considering the community impacts. So I actually disagree with the concept of how you're framing this, Bill.
So would an S1 and an S2 remain BAs all the way in the table 311 for the use regulations?
We're not proposing any changes at this time to that table at all. We're simply proposing a concept which is to change the zoning bylaws to move away from allowed certain professions and instead to look at community impacts. So the way I would frame it, Bill, is very different. I would say that I think we're being more considerate of the residential neighborhood and the residential components by considering strictly impacts to the residents around someone that is considering an accessory use of a home occupation. We have not made any proposal at all to change the table, which I believe you're referring to as 3.1.2. There's no proposal to change that at this time. Am I correct, Bill Nemser, about that? Did I get that correct?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
You're correct.
Would a
Does
change
that-
be required?
I don't know if a change will be required because we have no specific proposal on the table, but there's no proposal being discussed that would change that table. Bill Crenshaw, you're welcome to jump in and help elaborate on this.
Yeah, I would actually say technically there would need to be a change in the table because the very end of the table under other uses is a bunch of stuff, including some random accessory uses for residential areas. And so that part might change at the very end. Because that's where it says a trade shop needs a special permit in a S1, but it's okay to go in a central business. And, you know, that could change.
If you change a customary home occupation with non-resident employees. So if you have a home business and you have somebody that comes to help out, would that
Yes.
fit into an S1 BA?
But I think my point is, I think depending on how it works out, you know, there could be a extra category added, it could be consolidated. But I suspect that this little section that's being displayed right now, there'll probably be some adjustments to reflect the bigger picture of changing things based on intensity of use rather than type of use. So I do suspect that if some of these lines might change, maybe a little, maybe a lot, hard to tell right now.
Thank you. So if we're considering changes, how does this benefit residents of Maynard and residential districts without business interests?
Well, Bill Shu, I would ask you, what types of impacts would you, first I would ask, changing this concept away from allowed professions and instead having the zoning bylaws be based on community impacts, what do you think of making that concept change? Do you like that concept change? Does that sound good to you?
I enjoy the fact that the town has some oversight into the businesses that come into residential areas and that they are all at a hearing where people have the ability to agree or disagree and understand fully what is moving in within their district.
What types of impacts would you consider to be reasonable and what types of impacts would you consider to be unreasonable?
I would appreciate no impacts if possible. I can tell you that there are several businesses working in my neighborhood that are with the town that I didn't even know were there until I went looking. That is the type of impact, ideally, that I am interested in. I am not against business whatsoever. I am more or less against the impact of it. I am also against the growth of it in a residential district in a town that's very small. I would rather see focus on business development in any business centers in town that aren't fully utilized, and a possible entrepreneurial center where you could incubate these types of businesses and provide an affordable rent outside of neighborhoods so people can live in neighborhoods and work close to home at an affordable rate. That
Thanks,
is
Leo.
just an idea or a concept.
This has all been very helpful feedback from you, Bill. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you would like to add?
At this time, no, but I do appreciate your time and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Bill. Let's see. I'm going to go to the chat to see if there's been any comments. Let's see. I have one comment from Michael. I think this is probably referencing something that went a little bit further back in time during our meeting. Regarding noise ordinances. Bill Nemser, is there noise ordinances in town?
No, they, the town currently defers to the state standards for that. So when we have a noise issue, we use Department of Environmental Protection standards, and typically they will come in and assist with that if it's anything that's recurring or something we can get a gauge of. But the town has tried in the past to adopt standards for noise, and at the time it was not well received. So perhaps that would be something that would be revisited. I know it's been discussed, but as of now, no.
Thanks, Bill. Linda
Oh,
Thayer?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, may I add one thing on that?
Certainly.
Just to emphasize how the planning board has worked to preserve this sort of the harmony where there's noise involved. Often the planning board imposes noise or any sort of disruption that can occur because of a project. So they may set hours, for example, or it may not be on Sundays, before 11 o'clock, whatever. But the town has not adopted those. But the planning board has been, in my time here, always been very proactive with that.
Thanks, Bill. Linda?
Sorry, I keep hitting it. Linda Thayer, 14 Chandler Street. I really appreciate you folks holding this tonight. It's been really helpful to know that we are part of this conversation. And you've already answered a lot of questions that I had, a lot of concerns, including where this stemmed from. So that was really helpful. I also would just like to echo much of what's been brought up here. And I think enforcement is key. The process is really important. The way I first understood this was that basically anyone can open up and not go before the ZBA asking for a special permit. I think it's important that each business be required to do that after a certain threshold. So yes, the person working from home, with no customers or patients going in and out, no deliveries or minimal deliveries happening, that's one thing. But those things become subjective. The noise becomes subjective. Enforcement is key. So the process is important, enforcement is important, registration is important, and I think having the opportunity for neighbors to be a part of the conversation annually is not too much to ask. Things can change quickly. And unfortunately, the town, we are not good at enforcement. And I know that doesn't fall on the planning board, but when the conditions are set, at least there's an opportunity for someone whose home life is being impacted negatively by a neighbor running their business out of their home can be addressed. And there is a set of rules already in place. So noise is important, odor, traffic, hours, lighting. Those are all things that really have an impact on how people have an impact on people's lives while they're at home. People who go out to work, go off to work, and when they come home, there's a certain level of comfort that I think they'd like to have. And again, I'm kind of repeating a lot of what's been said, but I just really want to make sure that you folks look at this very carefully before you make any major changes. And again, process, enforcement. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Based on the nature of your comments, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyways. It sounds like you support the concept of moving towards looking at this zoning bylaw in terms of community impacts. Is that correct?
Repeat that.
So the concept we're putting forward is to prepare a new set of regulations based on community impacts and look strictly at community impacts as the sort of guiding principle of what the zoning regulation should be. Do you support that concept?
Somewhat.
Yeah.
I somewhat support it because I think impacts can be subjective.
Mhm.
So, your question you asked earlier of what would be acceptable for delivery week, once a month, it could be very different. I mean, there are people who live in my neighborhood who get a lot of Amazon deliveries every day, and they're not running their businesses out of their homes. So, but it's still an impact. It's, having more vehicles in the neighborhood, that's a whole other deal. But yeah, so it depends on how it's rolled out. And again, it comes down to process and enforcement. And unfortunately, enforcement is not something we are good at. And, to Bill's point, there is no noise ordinance. Odors are different. I love a cup of coffee and I love a brewed pot of coffee, but maybe in intense quantities, it might be overwhelming 3 feet or 6 feet from my bedroom window. So, we are a small community. It's a tight community. And I think whatever we do moving forward, I'm sure some of these things need to be addressed, but we really need to consider, I think to Bill Shue's comments, the residents are living in their residence. So, people chose not to live in certain communities or areas for a reason. And the impact just has to be, the whole thing needs to be really well and carefully planned. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that was well said, Linda. Thank you. And to Linda's point about repeating what has already been said, I actually want people, if something's been said, please, and if you think it too, please say it as well. It's just because it's already been said, it amplifies certain points. So if others support it, what's been said, please speak up as well. I want to hear from as many people as we can. That gives us the best sort of set of information that we have to work with. Michael Hart.
Hey, thank you. I just wanted to add a couple of comments that I was thinking of after listening to Bill and Ms. Thayer and the others. I think we definitely need to know who determines a change of character in the neighborhood, and perhaps make some standards towards what that is, what defines a change in character of the neighborhood. We definitely need to know, who enforces that change. And it would be nice to know if there was a specific body of enforcement that hears grievances from people that have problems with what's going on in the neighborhood. I heard a couple of people mention, yearly review. That yearly review should also take into account grievances of neighbors, especially because it's you're trying to keep a residential characteristic. And I also think that it should be a bias towards existing homeowners. Someone came into town, bought the house to live here, and it be a residence, and then someone shows up and starts a business next door. That's not really a tenable situation for the person that has precedence, as it were, in being a residential homeowner in a residential zone. If you bought a home in an S1 zone, you should probably expect that to remain an S1 zone, unless it is right on the border of a center of business. But anyways, that's just, I wanted to add those points, and I will stop now. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Bill Shue.
Hello again. Just to echo some of the things that have been said, The yearly review is extremely important to keep business owners honest. And I know you are interested in businesses growing and possibly bringing them into a commercial area. But as a business grows, things do occur that can affect the immediate surroundings of that business. So a yearly review would definitely help keep people honest. But one of the things that has been a major concern for me, especially having this not occur in other residential neighborhoods, is if somebody happens to move in and has a business interest or a commercial interest, they can immediately become an adversary rather than a friend, depending on the situation, because their motives are different. And those motives will remain different, and the interests will be completely separate from people who are trying to maintain a residence. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Jerry Colbert, did I get that name correct, Jerry?
You did, yes. Very
Great.
good.
Thanks, Jerry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to repeat something that Linda Thayer already said several times. Process and inspection, enforcement. How do we make sure it gets done? That's the part that's going to cost money. That's what's going to cost money to the town. That's all. I just wanted, as you were saying, repeat it, because the more times you're hearing it, it sort of brings up the value of the specific comment. I agree with, if 10 people have the same thing to say, well then, okay, that's more than one person's comment. So I know I have a little small consulting business that I have no people visiting, nothing. But my business is registered with the town. I pay my personal property tax with my computer and desks and things in my office. I can almost guarantee that half of the people who do that in the town of Maynard are not registered anywhere. I just think a lot goes under the table, never seen, never enforced. That's it. Otherwise, I think it's going in the right direction. Good job. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate that. Marie.
Hello again. Excuse me. I was waiting to see if other people who haven't spoken have had a chance. I had a question about, and I don't know if there's other bylaws concerning this, but if a business includes animals, is that something that's, like the care of, the raising of, the slaughter of potentially? But are, animals, could that be potentially part of this? And to me, that would be another area of potential concern.
Can I put the question back to you? What would you think about whether what you just said should be allowed or not allowed?
Well, I would have concerns for the things I would have concerns of for animals would be, if there were outside potential noise and smell. Also, it's been on the news, and I'm not talking about necessarily dangerous animals, but animals escaping into the town. Also, I mentioned the noise. So, it's fortunately not here, but in another location where I have property, one of the neighbors has chickens and it's really loud, and they're just pets. But I imagine someone boarding animals or caring for animals. And then, and we had the incident next door in Bolton. So, that was a concern. Businesses that would deal with animals. Now, the kind of home business that I might imagine, but I don't know what the potential, probably any potential odor or smell might be taxidermy, a small taxidermy shop. But so animals was something that I thought of after listening to some other people, even though no one brought it up. It kind of came to me.
Thanks, Marie. I think that's it's helpful to add other considerations here. So I think it's very helpful.
Yeah, I have a, when I imagine an ideal kind of home business, my best friend's father for years worked in a company, and he had a side business in his home that he repaired old clocks. That was a thing he loved to do, tinker with old clocks. And so that business included, having a workbench, parts, supplies. Every once in a while, a delivery truck would come. Every once in a while, someone would come and drop off a clock and pick it up. I mean, if you didn't know that business was there was no sign, it was all word of mouth. That was kind of a perfect, ideal little home business. But oftentimes people running a more substantial business are looking for greater income and would have more of an impact. So, one of the concerns I heard earlier, I'll repeat, was, the idea that, Maynard's downtown is not fully occupied. And I understand that someone starting a small business may not be able, probably couldn't afford the rents in that area. But it seems that, if we encourage businesses in people's homes, that further reduces the incentive to have the type of vibrant downtown that we see in some of our neighboring communities. So I think that this is something that does need to be thought of, and I think it needs, and I'll echo also the idea that the primary consideration should be given to the existing homeowners as opposed to the business. I'm not against business. And I can think of sort of the ideal. Someone comes, someone works in their house, they take something in, they send it out. But, when you're trying to basically skirt the laws of a more stringent downtown, then I think we could have some difficulties.
Thanks,
All
Marie.
right.
I appreciate all that. Yvette, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, thank you, Yvette. I live also on Summer Street. Just first of all, a really big thank you for holding this forum. It's your presentation was great, and I really appreciate the ability to have this conversation. I echo a lot of the comments made earlier by Linda and Marie and Bill and Mike. I think that the problem with any change is enforcement, and with words like impact, it's really hard to define the measurement. So potentially a solution might be to predefine the businesses that do not have impact and add them to that table so that it's easier for the town to just say, oh, you knit, that's fine. You work on architectural drawings on your computer, that's fine. Where things, where you have chemicals, hand tools, power tools, construction equipment, not fine kind of thing. We've also suffered from a lack of enforcement, and it's been very detrimental to the residential activities that you expect in your neighborhood, barbecuing, sitting outside, having a phone call, not even just working from home activities. And that's a big concern of ours, is to make sure that we are able to keep and maintain a neighborhood where kids can play outside, you can talk on the phone, that kind of stuff. And I would also ask, is there any financial benefit to the residents of the town for improving, as you're as you're saying, the laws to allow businesses, like, will it decrease our taxes? Will it improve the schools, or is this just to make the paperwork easier?
So first, thank you for your feedback. It's very helpful feedback for all of us. And thank you for your kind words. When it comes to finances, I don't think that this will have any impact on property taxes or any other type of taxes or income that would go to the town. So I can't think of any changes that we would, within the scope of what we're looking to change, I can't think of any impacts to town taxes. Bill Nemser or Bill Crenshaw, feel free to correct me if that's incorrect, but I can't think of any.
If a business is registered, as Jerry had pointed out earlier, they're going to pay personal property taxes. And if the business, generates revenue, is going to presumably pay taxes. Of course, if somebody was not registered, then it's possible nothing would come. But doing it the right way, yes, it is. So far as property taxes, this is not at all connected with it. This is a accessory use. That was, I think, was important to understand to make any progress on that particular issue. The accessory use, as it is not going to affect the property taxes.
Thanks, Bill. That's helpful. Will businesses be paying taxes as a business to the town?
Businesses are required to pay personal property taxes. And there is business registration, which is not, I don't have all the details on that exactly, but this should be. Are all businesses registered currently? I would seriously doubt it. And just one other thing that was interesting, and if Mr. Chair, may I make a comment from?
Please, Bill.
On a little bit. Yeah, it's very interesting because talking about some of the issues tonight, it's clear enforcement is paramount. And I get that, But I think what I don't want to not take away from this forum is, okay, if we understand that and that has been noted, but let's, for the discussion and the process that we're talking about, I think it's important to hear what has been proposed so far. And if you have a system or a process in place where there is, for example, a special permit requirement, and we've heard a number of people asked about, well, the neighbors should have an opportunity to speak on this. Well, that's why you have a public hearing process, and they would. I think the distinction on who would not be subject to a special permit review, and that is what has to be defined. But for a starting point, let's assume that the town hall is where this would originate, and somebody is, as I think Marie said, an architect who's scanning plans and mailing them to, emailing to their office. Well, I think it would be reasonable to presume that the outside impacts are probably going to be negligible. However, for this discussion, let's assume that the architect in there was having some sort of effect, whether it was noise, smell, debris, anything that we've heard. That's where the enforcement comes in. And then it's a code issue, meaning that the process would direct that is a violation of town code, and ultimately would lead back to the requirement then for special permit, because there is an impact being made. So I think that's really important, and I don't want to, I want to make sure that everybody understands. We hear about the enforcement part, but we also have to hear, I think, what the proposal the planning board and the zoning board have which is just a draft at this point, but what they're trying to do with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Yvette, did that help, particularly with the financial discussion?
It does help. Thank you very much. Because I would if the common denominator is we all pay property taxes and there is no additional financial benefit to the town, I would agree with what Linda and Marie and Bill and Mike were saying, where we have to really prioritize the residential character of the neighborhood. I'm a big fan of business as well. I like most people have been forced to work from home, but I don't own a business. I work for a company, and so it's very easy to see how changing the character of the neighborhood to be business first instead of residential first could have a negative, detrimental impact on kids forced to work, forced to learn from home, teachers forced to teach at home. All of us are forced to work from home. You know, that kind of stuff is very, has more impact than a business choosing to operate in a residential, in a commercial district. And I agree with what Bill Shue said. We have a wonderful, beautiful downtown that it's an opportunity to revitalize if there is a lot of interest in businesses happening in residential zones, to instead offer them, you know, an opportunity to make not only the downtown better, but community accessible. Like if there's a lot of businesses operating in town, nobody knows about them. Suddenly, if there was a space, we could go and support local architects and lawyers and graphic designers instead of doing that over the internet. That's an incredible opportunity for the town to grow and become a destination for businesses. And I think overlooking that and instead prioritizing residential properties, you know, is a miss for sure.
That's good feedback, Yvette. And I will emphasize one thing. From my perspective, there is no, this concept does not at all include prioritizing businesses over residents in a residential neighborhood at all. In fact, I would argue that the consideration is quite the opposite, that it's looking to understand, to change the concept to work towards looking at it from a community impact standpoint, and looking to improve the zoning regs so that the zoning board of appeals and others have the proper regs to make good informed quality decisions. I at no point is there any intention to make businesses more of a priority in a residential neighborhood at all. That's not the concept here. That was not the concept in previous, the current zoning regs, and that's not going to be something that I will ever support by prioritizing businesses in the residential neighborhood. Residents, it's a residential neighborhood zone, residential for a reason. I just wanted to make sure, I know there's been a few comments of that, so I just want to make sure that my perspective is understood.
That's a big relief. We're all kind of in our prison now.
I take full responsibility for not making that clear earlier. If that wasn't clear, I apologize. I go back to this again. This concept of home occupation is a accessory use in a residential, on a residential property. The primary use is resident. The zoning is resident, and that's the nature of that neighborhood or that area of town is resident. So I do have a question that I would like to ask everyone. I'm just going to put it up on the screen. So I'm going to share my screen again. So it's this bottom one right here. And I'm going to give an example from what I've already heard tonight. So the question is regarding this new vision for changing the zoning regs. What opportunities do you see for the community? What challenges? So I'm thinking about this in the framework of opportunity and challenge. And I'm going to give an example. Bill Shue mentioned earlier, and Bill, I will call on you and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned that there's an opportunity here with the downtown. I think Yvette touched upon this too. There's an opportunity with vacant spaces in the downtown. There's an opportunity. If the challenge is that people want to have home businesses that may have some impacts, that's the challenge. There's an opportunity for the downtown. So that's the question I'm asking. What challenges and opportunities do you see that can be supportive of people wanting to have a business in some sense or have an occupation in some sense? And what opportunities do you see? What challenges do you see? What opportunities do you see? Bill, you're welcome to comment on that, or you're welcome to share a different comment. It's up to you.
I hate to be a pain, but I'm really still struggling to see the benefit for residents and the benefit for the town. And because of that, I struggle to see where this actually started and where it came from, how it got initiated. I understand that we're looking at opportunities, but I haven't heard of, I've heard there's studies about how people are working, more home businesses, 2014 study. And since the pandemic, people are working from home and the way we've worked greatly changed. And I understand all that, but I haven't seen any detailed examples of how it would benefit the residents, how it would benefit the town. And thus I can't bring it back to how it's actually been generated and where this came from. There seems to have to be some sort of issue to resolve before you look at a possible zoning change. But I haven't seen any issues presented really as to how a change like this would actually resolve an issue that hasn't quite been presented. So I have a hard time following it from where we are back to what we want to do, back to how it got started. So to be able to support anything, I need to be able to go back to the beginning of it and sort of grasp where it came from with examples and some detail, so I can follow it up to where we are and understand the root of the issue, the cause, or why. That's all.
Thanks, Bill. So I will bring you back to the beginning. And the beginning is our current zoning bylaws. Here are our current zoning bylaws for sections 3.2.4 and 3.2.5. When I read these, I consider this a problem, because I look at this and it says just 3.2.4, home occupation. Any of the customary home occupations shall be allowed as a right conducted by resident occupants only, including but not limited to the work of any member of a recognized lawful profession, subject to the following: hairdressing, certain sales is number one. Number two, real estate office, period. That's it. That's 3.2.4. 3.2.5 references trade shops. And those who, it references a craftsman who lives and maintains a home on a premise or building may use said home or building thereon in connection with his trade by an annual special permit. And that's it. That's the extent of the zoning bylaws governing home-based occupations. I don't think that's at all adequate. Not only do I not think that, the Zoning Board of Appeals has conveyed to me very clearly that these regs do not provide enough guidance for recent applications or their anticipated future applications. So I would say that's the start of this. Now the question is, what type of regulations would be consistent with the characteristic of the town of Maynard and residential neighborhoods in the town of Maynard? And how can we regulate this appropriately? And so that's why we're here. And does that help at all, Bill?
Well, that part is what I understood, but I didn't see any examples of possibly businesses that have tried to come in or decisions that have been sort of ambiguous based on somebody taking something to the zoning board and saying, yeah, I want to have this and I can't tell whether it's allowed or not. Because to me, it just seems like they show up and they go to a hearing and people talk about it, discuss it, and it's pretty straightforward. We don't allow a whole lot, and it's up to the zoning board or people present to either agree or disagree with it based on fairly concise information. But there could be some cleanup of some things, but it's just hard to understand. Like, I don't know what hasn't fit into this. What kind of issues has the town had? What kind of issues have residents had that will be resolved by this? And again, when I figure out that, then I can understand, okay, so why was that then created and where are we headed with it? What do we actually want to resolve with it? And I understand we're looking at future uses too, and those are really tough. Future uses, future thinking is very important. But right now it seems like we have more immediate things to actually consider. as to who's going to benefit from just the basic changes, how we got here and why. And I know that I had heard earlier somebody discuss, you know, it is important to take away from this some of the positives. It's not all negative. But I'm not sure how something like this would move forward without some sort of an additional enforcement or work on enforcement of these types of things, because what I'm afraid would happen would be to say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and enforce things a lot better. Let's make these changes. We're right back where we were. And the residents are then chasing the town down, trying to say, you know, yeah, they're breaking this rule, they're breaking that rule. You know, you have to come figure it out. And then we end up at the zoning board anyways, for the same thing that we could have probably done in the beginning. That's just where I get confused on these things. I am listening, and I do listen to a lot of your meetings, and I appreciate the work you guys do. It's generally fairly thorough, and does protect the residents of the town a lot. But what I'm saying is I just have a hard time understanding this from the information that's been presented. So I struggle with that. Any clarity that can always be around that, as much detail as possible, is always useful, and especially examples. Something something to provide some context. That's all. Thanks again.
Thanks, Bill. I'm not going to get into any specific examples that the Zoning Board of Appeals has experienced recently or lately. That's not the point of this discussion. The point of this discussion is for me to hear from you what's specifically about community impacts, what your thoughts on our zoning reg changes. And so I'm here to hear from you. I'm not here to hear from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Natalie, is there something you'd like to add to this conversation?
I was just going to make a quick comment, just in terms of trying to make it more concrete. I wanted to make sure that people realize I think part of the issue with the current regulations and the specific selling out of hairdressing, real estate, and then those specific trade shop options listed. I think by just listing just those, it feels antiquated to me. And I think an important thing to do is to try and update things so that moving forward, we won't have to be changing this, as time goes on. My point for home occupations that might be allowed of right would be, there are so many things that are done online these days that are not real estate or hairdressing. And I do think that, if someone begins making cards in their house, in their home, and wants to sell them on Etsy, for example, I think that would be a benefit. It may not be someone who wants to get a shop downtown, but I think that encouraging those people, having language that shows them that, oh, if I wanted to, try and turn this into a business, that's something that I can do out of my home. And it does not have any impact. I think that when people talk about not wanting to increase any businesses in residential districts, I agree, residents come first for sure. But my point is, if we have someone who lives in a residential district who would like to perform one of these businesses that literally has no impact, I don't see where. I think that is something that should be encouraged. And maybe later on she'll open a shop in town, that sort of situation. I want those to be considered. Enforcement is huge, and we're going to have to come up with a way to encourage that, to deal with that. And I think that that's just important to consider, those minimally. I think that part of changing this is to encourage people who are already doing it or who have thought about doing it, that these things are already happening in Maynard, and you can tell us about it. You can register, we'll know about it,
Thanks, Natalie. I appreciate your thoughts. Linda, would you like to add something?
I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this, but I think anyone who's making cards out of their home is making cards out of their home and already has an online business. And putting this on the books is not going to, I don't think they feel that they need to be on there now, and I don't think this is going to change anything from that perspective. But just for clarification, so you're saying any business that's operating out of the home right now that's not listed in the 3.2 and whatever the numbers are, is in violation currently of our bylaws. Is that correct?
I wasn't trying to necessarily imply that. What I'm trying to say is that, and I'll say it very clearly, these bylaws were written probably in the 1950s. And so if you read them carefully, you can see that there's even some sexism involved here. They mention hairdressing services, specific. And I read between the lines and say, okay, that's specific to women. Certain sales, it mentions in the same, says hairdressing, certain sales. What were the types of sales occurring in the 1950s? They were sort of Tupperware sales or in-home friends sales, things of that nature. Real estate office is the next one. And then that's it. They're antiquated. That's my point. The regs are antiquated. They need to change.
So I understand that, and I wasn't saying that you were suggesting or implying it. I'm asking for clarification from a zoning perspective. Is any business not listed are all businesses that don't fall under one of those categories in violation currently? I'm just asking for clarification.
Yeah, Bill Nemser, I'll allow you to help out
Yeah,
here.
no, not necessarily. In the case of a number of these types of businesses, they will try to find, they being the special permit board, whoever's issuing it, planning board, zoning board, will try to find if there's a similarity. So for example, we've had, if you have an accountant, is it fair to say that a bookkeeper is going to fall under the same category? Or if you allow a psychiatrist, would a psychologist be the same? And then would a doctor be the same? And what happens typically is these boards work very, very hard. As you know, Linda, I mean, you're watching these boards. If they feel that there is an impact that is possible, like for example, visitors to a home or something like that, they have always issued some sort of mitigation. Maybe it's no more than one car an hour. Maybe it's, no visitors can come at all on the property. I mean, they're individually tailored for that particular use. Now, does that mean that anybody operating their business now that doesn't have a permit is operating illegally? No, there could be plenty out there that are operating illegally. That's absolutely true. But I wouldn't say that if somebody doesn't fall in one of those three categories that they are operating illegally. I would say they should have a special permit that specifically talks about that use, how the board evaluated that use, and why it's permitted. If the impacts, as we're talking about here, if there are impacts from any business, regardless of whether it's an in-home business or really not even a business, if there's impacts on the neighborhood, that should be a code issue, a code enforcement issue. Does that clear that up?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Could I ask a follow-up? And this would be directed at the zoning board, so I understand, Chris, if you don't want to do it, but has the zoning board had to deny many applications because they couldn't find a way for it to fit under a current allowed use? Does that make sense?
Sure. Bill or Paul Schneider, please, either one of you. Neil.
Paul, I'm happy to, or Paul's there.
I'll give it a shot here. We have had probably a dozen inquiries over this past year for some kind of home occupation. Most of them went through with conditions, but there were probably 3 or so that were withdrawn without prejudice because it was obvious that we were going to deny them. And so they withdrew their application and we have not heard back since. So to do this, what the planning board is putting together is going to be a great relief because it'll give us better guidance on what the criteria are for a naysay.
Does that help, Linda?
It does, but then of course I have another question.
No, please continue.
That's really, really good to know, Paul. Thank you. I guess, again, I'm struggling with how to phrase this. Based on what you just said, you had to deny some. How would these changes, or would these changes allow you to approve those, the ones that were denied? Does that make sense?
Again, I'll just emphasize, we don't have any actual proposed changes. We just have a concept of how to potentially go about change, right? So, so, all right,
let me rephrase it if you don't mind. Does the zoning board feel that what's the concept here, would that have changed on the 3 that were denied, without getting into specifics? Would any of those have been, would the outcomes have been different if this concept moves forward?
I think the answer would be that we probably would have had 4 or 5 denied rather than the 3 that were withdrawn, because we would have had more criteria to say, no, you can't do that. But just going on let's call it our gut of what we're thinking the thing would be, how much noise, how much traffic. If we had some firm guidance, it would be simpler and it would likely be more stringent to get something passed. That's just my feel of it.
Okay, thank you very much.
One thing Linda, I would say, and I don't want to say, so we have hands up again, so just to tag on what Paul said. Also, I serve as sort of a clearinghouse for a lot of these applications. They come in to my department first, and often we set them up for the appropriate hearings. Many are filtered out before they even go in. We'll sit down and we'll meet before the application is filed, and because it's something that is not permitted in the zoning district, it doesn't look like it would. I often would, if my advice is asked, or I would suggest that they reconsider and read the bylaws and how the zoning board or the planning board, whoever, would likely interpret this. So in other words, I try not to just bring people through the process for the heck of it, and let them make their decision.
Okay, the time is, I have 7:37, and I think we're doing well. I'm going to see if there's any questions in the chat. I don't see any additional questions in the chat. I'll take one more comment from Bill and Michael. Michael, you're first.
Hey, everybody. I just, I wanted to say, if this is just a concept, I feel like you need to bullet point out that concept. Like what you and Chris, you and Bill and Paul, I understand you guys are running the board and you're doing the things that you normally do. And a lot of us are stepping in from the outside, but like, if you don't have a fleshed out concept and we're having a meeting about it with all these people and we're talking about changing town bylaws without like a full fleshed out concept, how are any of us supposed to provide valuable feedback towards this? Like I saw you dancing around the question, and I hate to determine it like that, but people are asking for like, well, what's been the problem? Why are we here? Why are we talking about this? What's the real issue at stake? And I don't think that this has been effectively answered in this forum. Like what is the real issue other than, all right, the zoning board of appeals needs better guidance. That's great. They do need better guidance. I agree with that. Like, you could have shut down 4 or 5 businesses instead of the 3 that you did. Okay, cool. But like a concept is great, but perhaps like nail that down to some better key points that are more of an actionable item before we're all in here like thinking that you're trying to change everything, make things more lenient, make it easier for business to come in, make it easier to usurp the residential quality of a neighborhood. That's why I think a lot of us are here. tonight right now is to address some of those things. So I guess that's trying to be constructive criticism, and I hope I got my point across.
Thanks, Mike. I found this session to be immensely helpful, so I really appreciated your input and input from everyone else tonight. So thank you for that. Bill, shoot.
All right, sorry, me again. Just from everything I've heard, conceptually speaking, would like a single sentence in the zoning bylaws that said as long as it had no demonstrable effect on the neighborhood, that seems like it would have answered everything and this would be done according to what zoning said and according to what we're talking about conceptually is just the impact on the neighborhood. So just amending it to say as long as there's no change on the neighborhood and list out smell, sound, stuff like that. Wouldn't that just address all of this and make it a simple issue? Or it's just from what I've heard here tonight.
Just so I understand what you're saying we should propose to change the zoning bylaws so that there's a single sentence that says as long as there's no demonstrable impact on the neighborhood, including noise, sound, etc.
Amend, but yeah, it just sounds, I'm not saying that's what I want. I'm just saying it sounds like that's what would meet all the needs. If only several were denied, but more would have been denied based on basically the effect on a neighborhood. It seems like that might be a way to start instead of shifting the whole focus on the type of business and just say maybe it is a type of business, but no matter what the type of business, it can't show an effect on the neighborhood, or it has to be, brought to zoning or brought in front of a board to have somebody hear what the effect is and determine whether or not it's legitimate.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. All right. I'm going to give it another minute for any other additional comments, particularly from folks that we haven't heard from. And so everyone is aware, I my day job, I do run Zoom meetings as well, and I'm very comfortable having moments of silence, waiting for others to speak up. So I will give it some time. So I've found this immensely helpful, and I'm grateful for everyone that has participated and joined us tonight. I believe, so I'm going to go back very briefly to how this will proceed. Sorry, hold on. Okay. So next steps is that we're going to take the information from tonight, and we're going to take the information that we received from the survey that went out prior to this meeting. And the subcommittee is going to use that information to craft changes to the zoning bylaws. Those proposed changes will then go to both the ZBA and the planning board for discussion. We may have a joint meeting at some point to discuss both meetings so that both boards can discuss at once. But that's how we will proceed. We'll proceed with boards will discuss. At some point, we will get to a place where we have a zoning bylaw that is proposed, and we will circulate that for additional public input and input from other committees and other town admin. And the goal here is to work towards a potential town meeting in the fall, though I know I'm well aware that it may not occur, the town meeting, because it's not guaranteed, but at least that's what we're working for from a schedule basis. So that's how we plan to proceed. And again, the input that we received tonight has been immensely useful. So I just want to thank everyone again one last time. Bill Nemser, we should close the meetings, I believe.
Yes. And if I, yes, Mr. Chair. And if I may, I would like to say that I am very appreciative to both the planning board and the zoning board of appeals for the work that they've been putting in on this and the effort that has been really nonstop for these volunteers, and the town is very fortunate, and I certainly appreciate all the effort you have put in with this for both boards, and on an extra night for meeting when we met last night or night before, and Thank you.
Okay. Paul, would you like to do the honors first?
All right, from the zoning board, I need a motion to close our portion of the meeting.
I'll make a motion to close this portion of the meeting.
Do I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And from what I see, it looks like it's unanimous. So
Thanks, Paul. Jim, would you like to come on mute and do the honors for us? Jim is our most senior member on the planning board, and we always give him the honor of closing out all meetings. Jim, can you come off mute?
Here we go.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I would like to close the portion of the planning board, I'm sorry, the meeting of the planning board. I move to close.
I'll
Thanks,
second
Jim.
that.
Thanks, Natalie. All in favor, we will do roll call. Natalie?
Yep.
Jim?
Yes.
Bob Brown?
Yes.
Bill Crenshaw, you still here? Yes, you are.
Yes.
Annette? Yes, and I'm also a yes. I saw a yes. Annette, yes. Yeah, so that closes this meeting for tonight, everyone. Thanks again for your time. Just for a plug, the planning board has a meeting on February 22nd with the that meeting will include the co-op that's coming before us again for their second time. There's a few other items on that meeting. I think that will be an enjoyable meeting for all those that care about our community.
Thank you very much for a good meeting tonight, Chris.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.
Done. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity in the forum. We appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks.